Okay,
But
try to move the,
yeah,
That's her. Thanks, Mike.
yeah.
She's
beautiful.
a beauty.
Yeah.
Oh my God, everything about her,
Yeah.
everything. Oh, that's beautiful.
yeah, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we're good.
Amazing. It was so much fun.
Okay. Bob, let me know when we're ready to go. Okay, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, October 18th meeting of the Elementary School Building Committee. Before we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge that this is a hybrid meeting. We do have a member joining us remotely, Bill Flannery. So I do just want to confirm, Bill, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
And we can hear you a bit. Bob, is there any way to turn him up?
Yes.
Okay, we could,
All right. Can you hear me better now?
yeah, that's better. Okay, so a quick run through our agenda. We've got some administrative items to start with. After public comment and updates on public engagement, we need to approve some invoices. We need to do some meeting minutes approval. Then we will discuss the various community outreach that we've been doing and comments on next steps. We're going to do a quick update on project traffic and transportation impacts because we've been getting sort of data has been coming in from a bunch of different places, so we want to a little bit consolidate it and have a discussion around traffic and transportation. And then we're going to discuss the upcoming community forums on October 24th and November 7th. If there are no other, nobody else has anything, I will go ahead and get started. The first item is public comment. Looking at the Zoom and looking at the room, we do not have anybody present for public comment, but if anybody does arrive, I will hopefully entertain the opportunity for people to provide public comment at a later time. Updates on public engagement. So there have been a lot of opportunities for public engagement over the last few weeks. Last week, we were invited to and attended the Sustainable Green Committee open house, which Amanda Amanda and Dan, covered for the committee. We have had a meeting we met with both CPAC and the Hopkinton Moms Group. We've met with the Chamber of Commerce. We had an opportunity for residents of Legacy Farms to come and meet. And we have several more opportunities upcoming. The upcoming opportunities, just so everyone is aware, include EHOP has actually asked to do a video Q&A. So we'll be doing that shortly. The Moms Group had a follow-up with asking if we could do some Zoom sessions for those who could not make it. I've also had outreach from the Hopkinton Dads who want to schedule an event where we can go and talk about the project in more detail. So those are the kind of upcoming pieces of public outreach we have. Any thoughts from the sessions we've had already? So I think I've been at most of them, but.
Yesterday, we had only one person from Legacy Farms, so not a big turnout. But yeah, we gave them an opportunity. But
Yeah, and I think that's what we're trying to do is just be in as many places as possible.
I think we had a steady flow at Sustainable Green, both Sustainable Green committee members, but also visitors to the event with a bunch of questions, and Dan was great at explaining things, so I think it went pretty well.
Both CPAC and the Moms Group, I was at both of those. It was probably a handful of people at the CPAC meeting. It was about 12 at the Moms Group. I think I will say, I think the challenge we're having right now is just getting people at these events to talk about this project. I obviously when I see people one-on-one, there is some awareness and there is some discussion, questions, support for the project. But one thing that was notable when we were at the Hopkinton Moms Group event is that, again, we had 12 people there, but their level of sort of awareness of the project before that session was near zero. And so I think this is something as a committee that we have to really push hard, because we're putting things out there, but we are not getting the sort of penetration I think that we need to. And in order to make sure that people, even if we have a really strong base of support, know to show up on November 13th, we've got to figure out some new ways. Would love to hear people have thoughts about that. Yeah, we'll just love to hear people have thoughts about that, of other things that we can be doing.
I think the EHOP recording will be useful. People can access that. It's not interactive, but I think at least we can get the word out. People do like to access those.
I think so I agree with you, and the challenge is always is maybe more this is our own sanity than anything else, but like it's tough to tell how many people you're touching with that kind of thing. But you're right. I think it allows people to access it more on their own time and get those questions answered.
It might be an idea to have a table at like the Fruit Street Fields on a weekend, when there's a lot of soccer going on, a lot of families are going back and forth.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
One question I got from one of the residents in Legacy Farms is what's the voting process? Is there mail-in voting? Because this person was not going to be in town that day.
So, yeah, I mean, that's something we have to make sure we get out there. So from a town meeting perspective, it's in-person only voting. The ballot, people can do absentee, but the town meeting is in-person only still at this point.
What about, John, leafleting at like marathon drop-off? As the moms come through, just put a piece of paper in the car. You'd hit about 150 parents that way.
Yeah, that might be, we can definitely look into that. And we are going to do tables at Marathon and Elmwood for conferences. So we'll have the boards up and we'll have flyers out there. We did get, Tiffany reached out to a couple of the daycare centers in town. So Next Gen and TLC said that we could put some flyers out to get to the parents, just to build awareness. We are, we have the general flyer about town meeting. Do we have a flyer that has the forum dates on it?
No, I don't think it has the forum dates.
Could we have a flyer that has the forum dates on it? Because
We could.
that would be, I think, if we
Would
could
it be
get
the
that.
same flyer with the forum dates, or would it?
I think it could absolutely be the same flyer with the forum dates on it.
That's what I wanted to hear. Sure, it could be.
But I'm thinking,
definitely.
one of the things that I want to be doing is starting to put the flyer up in Starbucks and, those places around town. And I think it would be helpful if it had the forum dates on it as well, so that people could do that. But I would also say just, anyone you talk to, I think October 24th and November 7th are, would be really good to have some turnout, because regardless of kind of what the level of support is in town, I get worried when people aren't talking.
There is the possibility on some of the earlier forums you did do a mailing, like a bulk mailing, and so you could come up with a flyer that informed people, probably too early for the 24th, but
maybe the
certainly the 7th, and also informing them of the upcoming town meeting and election. I think that can be done in a nonpartisan way that would get the information in all the community, or all of the mailboxes in town, so that people were aware that there was the possibility to get additional information ahead of town meeting.
Yeah. And that's reminding me, one of the things I should do as well is I'll send an email to the local media outlets just to make sure they have the forum dates, so that I can get the Independent, Hop News, HCAM, etc.
Hey, John, I have a quick suggestion. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
As far as next steps, I'm wondering, are we allowed to be a little bit more proactive in responding to some of the comments that we're seeing on Hop News and The Independent in regards to the articles? The articles themselves on the schools seem to be pretty straightforward, but some of the comments contain a lot of misinformation, and I'm concerned, and I'm sure others are, that people may be making a decision based on what they're reading in comments. And I'm wondering how we can do a better job of addressing that misinformation.
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, from what are we allowed to do? You know, as individuals, I think we can, you know, we're able to respond to any comments we see. I'd want to get somebody's opinion on whether or not we could do that as a sort of an official ESBC body, which I can do. I've noticed the same thing. I've tried to stay out. I have tried to sort of stay out of the comments, but if there are people that I know, I often will reach out to them directly and try to clear up some of the misinformation. And to their credit, in several cases, they have gone back on the comments and made some corrections to what they understood. So I think, again, individually, I think we can take more of a proactive approach. And I can ask somebody if there's something we can do more as a committee. I know that Tiffany has mentioned that she has been doing something, you know, sort of responding to comments on Facebook as well, just to make sure that people that really have the clear story.
I wonder if we could reply with a link to our FAQs and fold into the FAQs responses to some of the questions that have come up. I know people have had confusion about the Ashland school that was built, things like that have recently come up. So I don't know, I know we have the FAQ page. That wouldn't be a point of view response, it would
Sure.
be a connection to the official source.
Here's a place you can go for more information as you're formulating your decision.
Yeah,
I think that's a
answers
good
to these
idea.
and other
That's a
questions
good
are
idea.
here, and then that
Yeah.
could just be our sort of patented response.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we could probably do that. I think that would be
Yeah.
an effective way to do it.
Makes sense.
Yeah. The Ashland School is one that I have seen come up a lot, and again, it's sort of, you're sort of chasing the answers, but it's worth saying out here that people have noted that the Ashland School was just built for around $90 million. It's worth noting, Chris can keep me honest here.
I don't
today,
know
which-
the exact number. It's slightly over 600.
It's slightly over 600 students for $90 million. So when you consider that, we're building for near 1,200 students for $158 million. It's actually pretty well within the same price ranges. So yeah, I would just say the more you can talk about this with everybody you know, push it. If you've got any ideas, let's keep driving. The other piece of a combination of outreach and process that we're working on right now is the warrant has been opened. The school article will be on the warrant, so we're starting to go through the normal processes. It's got to go through CIC and appropriation review. At the moment, the appropriation committee meeting looks like it's going to be scheduled on the 24th, right before our forum. We're going to try to have the meeting in the high school so that we can have as much coverage as possible at both, but we'll obviously split resources to the extent we need to. It is, again, both a good procedural, it's a necessary procedural item, but another good opportunity to talk about the project in public at appropriation, especially as it relates to the finances, the costs, the tax impact, all of those things that people seem to have questions about, rightly so. The more we can just continue to push the messages around that, the better.
Yep.
And then CIC, they were trying to have a joint meeting on the 24th. Doesn't look like that's going to work. So I think we're still waiting to finalize exactly when the CIC meeting is going to be. I saw that thread, but I'll be honest, I lost it today.
Potentially the 30th.
Potentially October 30th. Okay. So when those are locked in, I will share those with all of the committee for your information. There's certainly ones you're welcome to attend, but yeah. Okay, so we'll continue to Oh, I'm sorry. I should have noted as well, the one positive, another positive thing is the Hopkinton Moms Group, I think based on the presentation and based on kind of the interest level that group has asked to set up some additional Zoom sessions for people who could not attend. We know that those are easier for people to make it to. I think they had a higher positive response than actually showed up. Obviously, for when you have kids, things come up at the last minute, so the Zoom will probably allow more flexibility. So we're going to set those up as well. Okay. All right. Well, then, if there is nothing else, we've got some bills to pay. So we have, in your packet, we have an invoice package that includes 4 invoices. The first is from Vertex in the amount of $6,202.50. The second is from Perkins Eastman in the amount of $32,523. The third is from Miaras and Harrington in the amount of $337.50. And the fourth is from Thornton Tomasetti in the amount of $3,000. The total value of the invoice package that needs approval tonight is $42,063 even. Are there any questions or comments about the invoices? Okay, hearing none, I would seek a motion to approve the invoice package for 4 invoices totaling $42,063.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mike, a second by Jagrut. As I mentioned earlier, Bill is participating remotely, so we are roll call voting tonight. Amanda?
Yes.
Jagrut?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
Bill?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so it passes, the invoices are approved. Next up, I'm gonna lean on Chris a little bit here to make sure I get this right, because what we discovered is, Chris generously in his email to the committee noted that due to a clerical error, the wrong minutes were approved, when in truth, it was due to my error. And we approved a whole bunch of minutes we had already approved. So we've got to go back and approve several minutes that have been provided to us before. And so we'll go through these. There are 4 in total. The first are the minutes for August 11th, 2023. Are there any comments or questions on those minutes? Okay, hearing none, I would seek a motion to approve the minutes of August 11th, 2023.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Mike, second by Jagrut. Roll call vote. Amanda?
Yes.
Jagrut?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
Bill?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so those are approved unanimously. And I should have said it, it's 5, Chris, tonight.
The roll calls are easy.
Okay, there you go. Okay, next are the minutes for August 15th, 2023. Any comments or questions on those? Okay, then I would seek a motion to approve the minutes of August 15th, 2023.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mike, second by Jagrut. Amanda?
Yes.
Jagrut?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
Bill?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so those pass unanimously. The next are the minutes for August 29th, 2023. We had a busy August. Any comments or questions on those? Okay, hearing none, I would seek a motion to approve the minutes of August 29th, 2023.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mike, second by Jagrut. Amanda?
Yes.
Jagrut?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
Bill?
Yes.
And I am a yes. And finally, the minutes for our last meeting on September 19th, 2023. Any comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, I would seek a motion to approve the minutes of September 19th, 2023.
I move the minutes of September 19th, 2023, as written, sir.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Mike, second by Jagrut. Amanda?
Yes.
Jagrut?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
Bill?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Okay, we got them all?
It's very easy to do when it's the same every time.
All right, yeah. That was like the perfect thing for a minutes taker. Same motion, same second, same vote.
A lot
every
of
time.
copy and paste there.
Yeah. Okay, then I will, at this point, take a break from talking and turn it over to Chris to talk about the MSBA updates and final budget and maximum reimbursement.
So as Jeff reported at the last meeting on the 19th, we were going to meet with the MSBA on September 20th. We did hold that meeting, and largely the MSBA's total project budget that they'll be taking to their board meeting represented what Jeff had reported to the committee. The one variation is that there was a clerical error in the information that the MSBA had provided to us. They had used the previous Hopkinton reimbursement rate as opposed to the new Hopkinton reimbursement rate that we had previously reported on.
Yeah.
And so as a result, that had a material change on what the total potential reimbursement was at the end of the day. So at this point, we do know what that total reimbursement that they'll be taking to the board meeting for approval will be, which is $46,784,822, which is an increase from what we were forecasting earlier when we reported on it. And so that is the number that we've been circulating on a lot of the material that is being posted, including boards that I think are currently in some of the schools, as well as will be circulated around town for increasing information on the project.
That's all good news.
And then, do you want to discuss community feedback on the project or next steps? Or we kind of
I
covered
feel like
that
we
already?
already did that.
All right,
Does everybody feel like we already did that?
Yeah, pretty
Okay.
much.
We already did that.
all right. So, before we get into traffic and transportation, we wanted to speak to, I don't know, can we bring the PowerPoint up on the? Chloe? Hold on a second, let me try this again.
Hey, Chris, can I ask a quick question before you move into traffic?
Yep.
It's specifically on the contingencies, the owner contingency and construction. I know we had asked Jeff several meetings ago about, in a discussion, and he mentioned one of those that we would spend pretty quickly. Could you clarify which one he may have been referring to?
So typically in design, you're spending the owner's contingency, and you would spend that on items that come up that hadn't been planned for in the existing budget. So if there's additional design services that you wanted to ask for, if there was additional testing or preparation to gather more information as part of the design process, all of that would come from the owner's contingency. The owner's contingency really exists to cover the things that aren't the construction of the building. The construction contingency is typically reserved for the construction itself and is used to finance change orders. So that typically would be on hold until we get to the actual construction process.
Design contingency too.
It's the owners and the construction. So the owner serves as the design contingency. I think we do have an additional design contingency within the architect's budget. And that could also cover some of those additional services that might come up as we engineer the building. So if we find that, for instance, the geotechnical information yields some additional information and we need more testing or more borings, we would look to the design contingency and then the owner's contingency to fund items such as that. Similarly, with the geothermal well, if we determine that we'd like to get more information for whatever reason, that funding would come from either the design contingency or the owner's contingency to finance that information. And there's a wealth of examples that I could give you about potential things that could come up there, from planning board requests to other parts of the project as we design the building.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Can I actually build on that from a clarification? So I think Bill's question was there was a contingency that we would use quickly, but it's really, we would know quickly whether we're going to use or not use, right? So it's not expected that we'll use up the whole thing.
What we found, through our experience doing schools throughout Massachusetts is that the use of the contingency varies greatly based on the appetite of the committee to spend it.
Right.
We have had towns where they want to make sure that they spend every dollar appropriated to deliver the best project. And we are currently wrapping up a project in Millis where we gave the MSBA, or we didn't spend so much of the contingency that we actually surprised the MSBA. And so our closeout and audit has taken longer as they figure out what to do with the fact that we have spent so little versus what they expected.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful.
Which for that town was a good problem to have.
Right.
And for the town that wanted to maximize what they could get for the project, that was a good problem to have. So it's really up to the appetite of the ESBC.
Yeah, and I think we probably have, I'm guessing we, as a committee, we probably have less of an idea of sort of where along that spectrum will fall, but I think it's just important to reiterate that the use of the contingency, every dollar that's used is coming before this committee to determine whether we think it is of sufficient value to the building to use it.
And that's actually a good jumping in point for what I wanted to cover before we get into traffic and
Glad I can
our
segue.
broader discussion. So I have up on here the project timeline, and we've shared this slide in a lot of our community forum meetings, and it's really a summary of the process for making your building, but it's not a scaled summary of the process for making your building. We've talked about how we have the PDP and the PSR and the SD phases as part of what they define as the feasibility study, and that really gets us to the point where we're going to set a project budget. And that's really what all the work we've been doing up to this point was to identify the right project budget for what you're proposing for your school, where you're proposing your school, to make sure that we can fund adequately both the design and construction of that school. But when you take a step back and you look at the design timeline, what we're really talking about is a design of a building that didn't really start until the beginning of the schematic design process. And typically we'll call schematic design about 30% of that overall design process. So when you think about it scaled for the amount of design that we need to do, what we're really talking about is that we've done a schematic design phase that is really how much your building costs. And in support of that, we had a PSR phase that said, where do we want to put this building? And a PDP phase that says, what do we want to put in this building? But we still have a design development phase, and that design development phase is a lot of the decisions that are going to be made to develop the project into what you want the project to be. And that is going to take about the next 7 months. Then we're going to move into a 1-year period where we're going to take the design that the committee has settled on, and they're going to use that time to draw all the aspects of that building so that the contractor knows what they're constructing. And so we're talking about a significant amount of time that remains for the work of this committee to take place with the architect to really figure out what you're building and how you're going to build it. And so there's a ton of decisions that factor into that. The important part for today's discussion is that you're also going to have a project approval process that all built projects in the town of Hopkinton must go through in order to establish that the project that's proposed meets the community standards that they've set for what a project in Hopkinton should be. And so when we talk about what that project approval process looks like, it's both the local reviews, such as going before the Conservation Commission, going before the Planning Board, which has multiple steps where we'll look at the Design Review Board's comments, we'll look at water and sewer to make sure that it meets the infrastructure needs of the town. We'll look at stormwater and drainage to understand the effect that the project will have on both its own property and its neighbors. And we'll look at traffic again. We'll also have a state review process, some of which we've already begun to look at, make sure that the building that exists at 147 is not a historic structure. And we'll have to go through reviews related to both the Environmental Policy Act of Massachusetts, and also we'll go through reviews with the Massachusetts School Building Authority to make sure that the design we're proposing meets their standards as well. As part of that planning board process specifically, there's multiple steps that the town will go through with the project and the planning board itself and the various arms of the planning board. And that includes third-party reviews. So there'll be a third party that reviews the stormwater that's proposed. There'll be a third party that reviews the traffic that's proposed. we'll notify all the abutters so that they know that these public hearings are coming, and then we'll hold those public hearings. And that's really an opportunity where we're judged against the standards that are set for buildings that are being planned in the town of Hopkinton, and make sure that we're meeting those standards, and any discussion points that need to occur during that process. There'll be a back and forth through multiple meetings where the planning board will ask for more information, the designer will respond.
Yeah.
Anyone who is involved in the process can attend those hearings and share their thoughts. And it's really coming to a conclusion with the planning board to ensure that what is proposed meets the overall standards that the town is setting for development within the town.
Yeah.
I bring this up because in any discussion of stormwater or traffic or any of the other impacts, it can appear at this time like voting is like, if you live on Hayden Road, you might feel like the town's voting to take the portion of your yard that you feel is yours, when in reality, we're voting to set a budget. And so we've established a framework that we feel can deliver a school at a certain cost. That framework contains assumptions, and the design process is really going to validate those assumptions and figure out what we want to move forward. At each stage of the process, during both design development and construction documents, we'll be meeting in this body to discuss a lot of those choices, and we'll be meeting with the planning board and other town entities to discuss a lot of those choices. So the vote is not to build the building that's before you. The vote is to set a budget that will reach the building that the town wants to ultimately build. And so we thought that before any discussion of traffic or any of these other hot button issues where there can be a lot of varying opinions, we wanted to just make sure we establish that as the framework for the discussion, because I think it's an important point that some people misunderstand when you're proposing a project of this size.
Thank you for that. And I think, so I appreciate that. And your last sort of angle is important in terms of, but interestingly enough, I think it also highlights that we've heard questions on both ends of that, right? So we've also had questions from people who say, you're saying it's 30% design, when are we going to get the final number of what's actually going to be proposed? And what you clearly explained there is, this is the final number. The one that we have right now, the one that's going on the warrant at town meeting, is the project budget. When we say 30% design, there are some more decisions that come in with that, including the traffic piece, the stormwater, et cetera, that will go through this approval process that may make some changes to the project, but that budget is that budget. So it's not as if that will vary within, well, I shouldn't say, the budget is the budget, it's the ceiling, right? So those contingencies, other decisions that we've made, we will not be able to spend above that. We will, we'll have the opportunity to obviously come below that if we find some efficiencies throughout the project.
And the perfect example of that is the street improvements with the traffic. You may decide that not all of those street improvements through that public process and the ESBC's own discussions, you may decide that not all of those elements move forward. And that means you spend less on that piece. You may decide that given that it's a wet site, you want to go above and beyond from a stormwater perspective to ensure that you mitigate a lot of the effects of the project at a higher level than the sort of the standard that's set for that, just to be a good neighbor. And that may cost more, and the contingency offers you the reserve that will pay for those additional decisions. So that's really where the ebb and flow of the project is as you refine the individual elements as the process moves forward.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and as you point out, that's all done through public process, not just at these meetings, but in a lot of these local review and approval.
I think the most important takeaway from my perspective, having been through this before, is at town meeting, the people are going to vote and think that's the end of it. It's the end of their input. This is what we're going to build. When in reality, the planning board aspect of it that comes later on is perhaps more important. The planning board will hire a third party to review all the documents we've submitted. They'll invite all the abutters to come and comment on whatever, stormwater, traffic, and ultimately the planning board will vote on what is going to happen. It's not a rubber stamp by any means, and the important takeaway is after town meeting, the residents will still have opportunity at the planning board to make their desires known, and the planning board, being voting members of the town, will take that into consideration. So town meeting is the end of it. And,
Yep. Any other questions on the project process, the local review and approval process, anything on that? Okay.
So we know that you wanted to talk about transportation and how it relates to the proposed project tonight. We worked with Perkins Eastman to put together some slides that look at some of the direct impacts that relate to the choices that have been made up till this point about how we orient the site, the capacities that are built into the site, how the different aspects of the site work together. But I know that this is a discussion that the ESBC wants to have about these varying aspects. So we had Perkins put together some of the thoughts that we're aware of for the benefits that the project brings to both the district's transportation system overall, and also the specific problems that are addressed by some of the modifications that have been, or the decisions that have been made that have led us to this point. So we know that by combining Elmwood and Marathon next to one another, it gives you the opportunity to free up 12 buses in your fleet, because there's a better synergy with putting all of the kindergarten through 4th grade students on that one grouping of buses, and you're able to both reduce the overall number of stops, so you don't have 2 buses following each other making the same stops, and it results to about a 28% reduction in stops. We know that avoiding some of the bus crossings at Hayden Row, every time you send a new car onto Hayden Row and it needs to make that left-hand turn right now, you're introducing something that stops traffic. And so by currently sending the Marathon buses to Hopkins and the Hopkins buses to Marathon, it introduces that need to interrupt traffic. And so we're taking that off of Hayden Row, and it circulates purely within the site itself. We also know that parents backing up onto Hayden Row during drop-off is one of the things that affects traffic. We talked about that as part of the traffic report. And so by having those internal circulation roads that are off of Hayden Row, it allows us to find a way to, for both schools, bring those parents off of Hayden Row, or the queue of those parents off of Hayden Row, and give them the opportunity to queue separate from the traffic on the street, so that if they want to get there early, there's a place where they can line up where they're not inhibiting traffic, and it gives the opportunity to efficiently move those 2 queues of cars through the site and back to where they need to go as part of the design that we have already delivered to date. So I'll turn it over to the ESBC for discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So this was something that I had suggested we raise in a discussion in one of our public meetings, because I think one of the things that we talk about, obviously traffic has become a bit of a hot button issue, but I think we don't talk enough about the co-location aspect of this building and what it's going to do to benefit. It was sort of an epiphany I had driving Hayden Row, because one of the things that I've noted is that the slight change to start and end times of the schools, creating a little bit more separation between the start and end times of schools, at least in my experience, and I'm driving up and down Hayden Row a lot during the day, has had a beneficial impact. So it made me think, like, what else aren't we talking about? I know that when we talk about the bus piece, the reduction of 12 buses gives more flexibility. So Dr. Kavanaugh, Mr. Rothermick, you can talk about this more, but I know that one of the big complaints is time on bus, and what freeing up 12 buses could potentially do to that could be a big benefit to the district.
Well, one of the struggles that we have, we've been adding buses every year to address some of the enrollment growth, but we really struggle in having bus drivers. So here we have 12 buses with drivers that we would now be able to pull over and be able to utilize at the elementary level. And that's where we can really increase our fleet at that time. And if we can increase the fleet, we can reduce the amount of mileage those buses are trying to cover. So our big hindrance is drivers, but we have 12 buses with drivers captive, ready to go.
And that's, yeah, I think that's another one of those points I think people wouldn't quite realize is that, yeah, the drive, it helps relieve
Yeah.
that driver piece.
Yeah, and maybe people at home don't realize that Elmwood has its own fleet of buses.
Right.
I mean, I don't know that we've articulated that, so Marathon and Hopkins are sharing a fleet, Elmwood has its own fleet. If Elmwood moves, then all of those buses can be put to different use. Currently, they drive around following each other.
Yes.
2 buses, 1 route, following each other. It's a terrible waste of resources.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a terrible waste of resources and probably not great environmentally either.
Yes, that's
So,
right.
Right.
and then I think one of the other points that you raised about the crossovers between Hopkins and Marathon School in the turning left across it. One of the highlights from the traffic study was that the peak times down Hayden Row of traffic volume aren't necessarily the school drop-off and pickup times, which is probably the most frequent thing I have heard people question when we're out there talking about this in public. And what obviously has come through that traffic study is it's not the volume of cars at school pickup and drop-off time, it's the left turns.
Yeah.
And that stop traffic and that make, that back things up and make people wait. And this would be reducing the number of left turns
Yep.
that have to happen when buses are going between Hopkins and Marathon. Additionally, I have heard, and this came up at the moms group meeting the other night, some parents aren't big fans of the age distribution on the elementary buses, which is a logistical necessity. And there are some who don't necessarily like that the kindergartners are on the bus with the fifth graders in Hopkins just for the age disparity. Whether or not we think that is, but this would help at least alleviate that somewhat in that it would separate those students a little bit more. And then I think that having being veterans of the Marathon project, we know that for various reasons of sort of the land structure over there, that driveway we probably would have built a little bit longer if we could have. By doing what we're doing and setting the Elmwood site back, we're going to be able to take a lot more of those cars off of the road. I mean, as a ratio of cars. Of car queue to drivers, it's much more significant here than it is at the Marathon School. The other thing that I thought was notable that isn't on the slide, but I believe the number was somewhere around 60% of current students at Elmwood have a sibling somewhere else in the district.
Yes. that's-
And so of those 60%, whoever, the getting driven to school, in many cases, there are parents that are going to multiple places and having to cross. And what we know is that Hayden Row in the school area is not nearly the only choke point of traffic in town, and that by co-locating these schools and allowing those parents who either might have a student at Marathon and Elmwood or even Marathon at Hopkins, they're able to more easily do that. And I know anecdotally that parents also talk about the times where they have to pick their children up, and it means they have to be at one school and race across town to get to the other school. This is going to allow a lot more flexibility for that, and probably, again, have beneficial impacts on traffic.
And the reality is that the travel from the Hayden Row complex of schools to Elmwood is 2 to 3 unsignalized left turns on some of the busiest roads in town. And so each one of those left turns is stopping the traffic behind them on a 2-lane road and contributes to the overall traffic.
Absolutely.
I know that I asked the school committee or the school leadership to try to figure out why so many parents are driving their kids to school. And I know there's a million reasons. And yeah, I have 4 grandchildren, Hopkins, Marathon, Elmwood, and one in middle school. My daughter-in-law, Katie, who insisted she should drive them to all the schools, I don't know how she did it. Just what you said, 4 kids, 4 different schools. This year, all 4 kids are taking the bus. And the kids love it. And I suspect Katie loves it as well. In terms of the concerns about, mixed grades and stuff like that, that's probably as old as bus transportation exists. Perhaps the mom's group could volunteer to be monitors or something and take care of that situation. But I'm happy to report that 4 kids are taking the bus that weren't taking it last year.
Well, and it's really stressful to parents who are doing the pickup,
Yeah.
especially if they only have to do it once in a while, so
Yeah.
they're not maybe
Yeah,
used to it.
exactly.
But they have a doctor's appointment, so they have to schedule their day so that they start at Elmwood at 2 p.m. in order to get to everybody on time. And we,
and having
we
picked up
always
the
had
kids at all the
parents that were
schools.
very
Yeah.
teary. I'm sorry, I'm late. And we know.
Yeah.
So we're saying, no, we understand, but
I'm
it's
not sure
stressful.
the general public appreciates the amount of work, this extra work the staff has to do to monitor, making sure the kids get with the right grandparents and the kid. There's 3 or 4 teachers out there every pickup, and that's every school. When they should be doing correcting homework and doing teacher stuff instead of that. So hopefully that part will improve. I think a lot of it started with COVID. A lot of the parents were working from home, and they said, what the hell, I might as well drive the kids to school.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll kind of work its way out. But I think with these improvements, and particularly the queuing on the off the road onto the school site will help a lot. But again,
Yeah. Well, I think the hope is too, if we have shorter bus runs, more people
Yeah,
would be
exactly.
putting their kids on buses, so.
exactly. And that will help as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people will say, my child's already put in 6.5 hours, they're exhausted. Another
Yeah.
45 minutes on a bus feels
Yeah.
unfair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And realistically, we talk about doctor's appointments and things like that, but we know that children have a lot of after-school activities. 45-minute bus ride in some cases, especially at the elementary schools that finish a little bit later. I've experienced it. There are times when you're like, I can't, my kid can't come home on the bus. I won't get them to
That's right.
soccer practice in time. It won't get, and so that's a very realistic, so slimming down those bus routes would have a significant impact there.
And I know the school provided us with this information, which really highlights how widespread those bus routes are throughout town. And I think the number that we got was about 28% of these circles could go away and be replaced with a single bus ride, because you're no longer having to have multiple stops on the different bus routes. And so one of the advantages that comes from having more buses available is that one bus doesn't need to do as long a route, because that route can be a different bus.
Yeah.
That's going to shorten those travel times. Not having to sit and wait for a bus to load at Hopkins and then wait for that bus to be able to travel to Marathon and then wait for it to load at Marathon. Those are minutes that those kids will get back, because they only have to make the short loop road jump over to the other school as part of that loading at the end of the day, or unloading at the beginning of the day.
And, as experience gets built into this, so those 12 buses give flexibility to adjust those bus routes. If the adjustment of those bus routes can be accomplished with 10 buses, we start to look at hard dollar savings. And so that's another piece from an operating budget perspective. So it could have potential, many potential benefits. Any other questions about the transportation side of this? Bill, want to make sure you can get in if you have anything.
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay. I think next,
I think everything else we have is a recap of
Yeah.
what the traffic study had told us about what are the issues and what are the improvements and how do they relate to one another.
yeah, so at the moment, when it comes to those, as Chris mentioned, we still have the same, we're still at the same point when it comes to what are the challenges that exist in Hayden Row. Again, I want to point out that this traffic study provided a lot of data, and the school has already acted upon some of it in adjusting those start and end times, which was one of the recommendations in the traffic study to create that gap. So it's not like we're solely waiting on the project to see what we can do about that traffic flow. This is, from a process perspective, the deeper dive on traffic and traffic, mitigations will happen, as Chris mentioned, as we go through the permitting process, as we go through the detailed design process. So there's not a lot of change here. I did want to have the opportunity to raise it again with the committee, just to see if there are any additional questions that we have, which I'll open it up to. But before that, I will also note that I reached out to the neighbors on Hayden Row because we haven't had a chance to speak to them recently, and asked if in their conversations among themselves they have any additional questions. They did send a list of a number of questions, and so what we're going to do after the committee has a chance, if there's anything else, I'm going to go through them if everybody is comfortable with that. We're going to try to answer as many of these on the fly at the meeting as we can. If there are ones that we can't, we will obviously get an answer back as quickly as possible. And then what I will do is, even for the ones we answer on TV tonight, I'll provide a full response to the group of neighbors so that we have all of those questions answered. And I did speak to one of the neighbors earlier in the week, and we're going to continue to have more engagement with them as we head up to town meeting and get through the process. So do we have any other, and I think Chris has like the other slides that you've all seen before.
I queued them up just in
Yeah.
case you had any questions or wanted to look back on any of them, or if they were useful for answering any of the questions that we talked about.
Just had one, not such a question, I think some of this is unfolding during this next design phase, but I'm comfortable with the Hayden Row design. I appreciate reducing the left turns and so forth. It's the on-campus piece that I haven't quite got my mind around, the modeling of how the rotary will work with the traffic coming in the multiple entrances. Just kind of, as we go forward, it'd be nice to get a little bit more detail about how, between buses and cars and the 2 points of entry and the one exit if you're turning left, how that rotary is going to flow. And I know all of this is fine detail that we work as we go forward, so it's a little early to ask, but I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah, you'd make a good point. Like, one of the things that we asked Perkins to include was additional traffic counts that relate to those three schools so that we can fine tune that as part of the development of the design. We know that the roads between the two schools provides the opportunity for circulation to be better organized, but we haven't gone to the detailed level of detailed plans of how that circulation can work. We know that from the history of Marathon that there was an intention to do the drop-off in a different way when it was first built, and over time it's evolved. And so that evolution can continue as we introduce the new school and find the most efficient way to use those loop roads with the school and the minor changes that we need to make at each of the entrances in order to make that work in the best way possible.
Any other? I just have one procedural question. So we talked about, additional traffic study work being done, as we go through the design phase. Will they do car counting again? Is that part of it?
They could.
Okay. I'm just wondering, and we can discuss this as we go. I'm just wondering again, given what we talked about with the changes in the school pickup and drop-off times, if it might be worth observing that and not just going with like John's anecdotal.
They've done it twice already, so this would be a third time.
Yeah, but they haven't done it since, have they done it since
They
school
did,
started?
yeah.
Oh, they have? Oh, okay.
They did it last year.
No, I mean, so
So
this
do
year
this-
they changed the start and
They
end
can
times.
do it again this
So
year.
there
That
might
was one of
be,
his
there might be an
recommendations.
impact.
Yeah, he can do another round of it. We've
Yeah.
done it. We did it during PDP, and then we did it again when we did the full traffic study.
Yeah, just as we see, I mean, if we see a significant change and it has any impact on anything, I think given the significance of that change to the start and end times, it would be due diligence to just make sure we do that again. So if nobody has anything else, I will go through these questions. I will try to take a first pass at answering where I can, if that's okay, and then please jump in and tell me where I'm wrong. Or I'll just look over at that side of the table when I
They'll
don't know
tell
the
you.
answer to the questions, and they can help me out. The first,
For the public's benefit, I would like to point out that we received these about 2 hours ago.
yeah,
So we're doing our best to either provide answers or give you the clearest information we have about what it would take to get those answers.
that's a really good point. Again, the conversation I had with the resident that was seeking this input occurred yesterday. So they did turn it around pretty quickly, but it was tight to our meeting, as the whole thing was. But we want to give them an opportunity to answer as quickly as possible, but we will not let speed impact thoroughness of answer. So we will keep working these as we go past. The first one is due to the potential increase of traffic on Hayden Row, has the committee considered placing telephone and electric lines underground? I don't know if that was something that was considered in the traffic study. We can certainly confirm that. It's not something that we have discussed, and probably would be something that we want to discuss at the town level if that were to be considered, because we know that's a significant project that would probably extend well beyond the school. But in addition to checking the traffic study again, I'll reach out to the town manager and see if that's been considered as a town project. Regarding streetlights and signage, will all new and existing crosswalks be lit electronically?
So I was able to catch the traffic engineer before he left the office to get answers to these.
Excellent.
So he's asked, he wants a clarification if the question is about the crosswalk having in pavement lighting, which you've probably seen. I think it is not.
Right.
But he would say he would be against that. But he said if the answer is no, we don't have that. But there will be push button actuated LED flashing beacons on either side of the road that will go into flashing mode when the button is pushed. Typically this is a typical high visibility treatment for that kind of setup.
Which is consistent with what we have at EMC
Yeah,
Park
yeah,
and outside of
In
Bill
the center of town.
Yep.
Yeah.
And any site lighting of the area to make sure that visibility was good would be part of the design process that we'd enter into as we refine those areas.
Will don't block the box street lines be placed at key intersections, Chamberlain Street or in front of residences, allowing cars to turn left, southbound across potential left turns? Essentially, this is, if the traffic backs up, will there be lines that indicate not to block those street crossings? I don't know that that's been considered into the design yet, but I would think it's certainly something.
No, but his answer to that was that the detailed pavement markings on the roadway will be developed as part of the design phase.
Yeah,
So he's saying, with input from DPW and town engineering.
yeah.
So he's basically saying, like, I need to speak to them first to understand what they're gonna be looking for, what the requirements are, how that layout would work.
Yeah, it's not an unreasonable request.
No.
You figure like Chamberlain Street, it comes out right between these two schools. We have this, don't block the access going down to Wood Street for the people coming out of the childcare center. Easy, cheap thing to do, I think, We just gotta encourage the DPW to do it.
Yeah, and I think I think that, I would agree with that take, and it's probably, I appreciate it being raised, because I don't know that was something that was considered in the initial design, but you're right, it seems like a fairly easy one, and one we have done in other places in town. So we'll engage the DPW as we go forward to make sure that
It's a
is a
no-brainer.
possibility.
Those signs are a good reminder. The rest people will not do it, but if they see the sign, they'll think of it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, no, I agree. What is the anticipated project timeline, and what is the sequence of the build-out? So I think so from a construction process, we would,
June of 2025 through
Right.
January 2028.
right? and-
Yeah, so when the when the construction starts, one of the most initial phases will be site clearing. So there will be access off of Hayden Road to the site that'll be established. We'll try and do that quickly so that we can make sure that we're not in conflict with Marathon Start of School to the extent that we can. We may elect to phase that so that we give them a specific date that we need them to establish that by. In terms of the traffic improvements, there's a lot of variability and decisions that can be made about when we think the right time to do that is. It may be that we want to introduce at the Marathon School earlier, but certainly the Elmwood School's entryway, that will come later because you don't want to set up a situation for people to drive into the construction site. You want to set up a situation for them to drive into the new school. So it'll be sequenced based on decisions that this committee makes.
Okay. Where will construction vehicles enter the property/site? So it sounds like they're coming in through,
Our emphasis would be on 147.
what, so it would be
So that we
147?
create separation from the traffic that's at a K or a pre-K to 1 school.
So a fairly early on part of the process would be the demolition of that home and.
I think that's something we'd want to expedite
Yep.
from the perspective of limiting traffic conflicts with what are the youngest users in the town.
Absolutely. Will there be temporary road conditions? So will there have to be adjustments to the road conditions for the construction going on?
That will factor largely into a number of things. There will be street work for things like sewer tie-ins. And there will be work associated with the decisions that are ultimately made about the traffic road improvements. It's very difficult to not have temporary road conditions when you're expanding by a lane. Like it goes with that. But decisions about whether we're expanding by a lane, as I mentioned earlier, are decisions that were made to set a budget. They aren't decisions that are set in stone. And the development of how that evolves is going to continue through the design process right up until that approval process within town.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, it seems like there's a definite temporary road conditions when you talk about
Yeah.
the sewer tie-in, but then the rest of it, well, a lot of it will then be determined by the decisions that'll be made. There's a question here, will homeowners get formal responses to previous requests for information? My answer to that is yes, but my caveat to that, and I will put this in my response, if there are previous requests for information that they have not received responses to, I'd ask that they alert us to that. If it's an oversight on this committee's part, we will get that resolved as quickly as possible. If it's an oversight on another town committee or department, we will take the responsibility of following up and making sure that they get an answer. Post-vote, who will homeowners engage with regarding the proposed traffic light, ESBC, planning board, et cetera? The primary engagement will still be the ESBC. As Chris outlined, this committee will continue to have the oversight of the construction of the project and the decisions related to it. But certainly as we go through the permitting, the planning board will be an important partner in that, and certainly somebody that homeowners can engage with as well. But the ESBC will maintain the management of the project, the management of the budget, and the decisions around spending. If there is a road connecting the new Elmwood to the Marathon School behind Hayden Row, why is a turning lane needed to turn into the new Elmwood School? Why can't the access road handle the traffic? So essentially, why can't we do the
All of it at Marathon.
yeah?
His answer. There's an internal connection between the two schools, as we all know, and we've shown on the drawings before. The purpose of the turn lanes at both driveways onto Hayden Row is to minimize the disruption to through traffic while maintaining flexibility of being able to spread the traffic over the two driveways rather than a single. Putting all turning traffic or all left turn traffic at a single driveway could have negative effect on the throughway of the street.
And so back to the earlier point, that's a process that needs to evolve.
Right.
So that needs to be discussed with the planning board. It needs to be reviewed by a third party. if we're making a change to the recommendation, or even if we don't make a change to the recommendation that's in front of you would still be reviewed by that third party. I would remind the committee that a traffic light was initially proposed as part of the Marathon School, and it was the planning board process that eliminated the traffic light at that time, based on the judgment that for the number of kids that were considered at that time for Marathon School, it would not qualify for a traffic light. We all know that that number of kids has continued to grow and could potentially qualify for a traffic light on its own, and will grow by more with Elmwood. So that's what's supporting the recommendation for a traffic light.
Yeah.
But as we stated, it was recommended as part of the Marathon project and it didn't move forward. So that public process is a big part of how these
Yeah.
decisions
Exactly.
ultimately get made.
Absolutely. This is one that I think we probably can't answer quite yet, but what is the intent of the traffic light and what will be the sequence of the light? Red and green during school hours, yellow during off-peak hours, et cetera. I think these are decisions that will get made as we go through that design and planning process. That's not something that we have a detail level that we have achieved yet, but that'll certainly be something that's part of the public discussion and the planning board discussions.
In general terms, when you establish a traffic light, there is typically a review period after the traffic
right.
light is established. And there's options within how you set up that traffic light for how frequently it will go off. Anybody who's driven down 109, we placed a traffic light for their new elementary school on 109, which is in series after another traffic light. When we initially opened it, we found that the sensors in the turning lane were being triggered by drivers who had decided that they would clip a little bit of the turning lane as they go through, and it was leading to frequent stops. We had the traffic engineer assess the situation. We made modifications to the programming to eliminate that so that a bus or a turning car had to sit there for a certain period of time as opposed to just triggering the sensor, and that changed how the traffic light worked. In this situation, those types of decisions would be made based on factual data that the traffic engineer had. He would make a recommendation that we would put into place, and in a similar manner, we would make sure that that recommendation is functioning the way that we need it to efficiently allow traffic to both turn and continue through the intersection.
He does have an answer, but I can share it with you and you can put it in your official response.
Okay, is it?
He basically is saying he does have a concept as
Okay,
to how
well,
this
we
thing
can
would
share
work.
it now.
So he's saying that it'll serve multiple purposes. It provides the break in traffic between Grove and Chestnut, which in turn helps numerous unsignalized driveways and curb cuts between the two existing signals. It also accommodates turning traffic into and out of Marathon without the need for active control. This signal will have actuated crosswalk, but it will need to be on all the time. But when there is no school-related traffic and no pedestrian, it will stay green and allow movement through. So that's what his initial. So it'll be green.
Say solid green on off.
Solid green on off. Yep.
Okay, and
So-
then it would be if there's somebody late at the
Somebody goes and
school,
presses the
they
button or
would,
goes
or
into
somebody's
that.
pulling out of the school, it would turn.
Yep.
As a result of that.
So that's the concept. But Chris is absolutely right. When it's done,
Yeah.
there's a period after that where you go back and you review it to see what's actually happening and tweak it and make sure it is functioning the way that you expected.
And we've had recent experiences with that in traffic lights in town. I know the light
Yeah.
at Chestnut and Hayden Row has changed based on the behaviors and traffic patterns. A good question, number 11 here is, can a dedicated police officer control the traffic during high travel times? Ashland Middle School on Route 135 has done this for several years effectively. It's a very good question. As we go forward through this process, it's a question that we want to take up with the town. If there is the possibility of using a dedicated police officer in this position. So there can be challenges with that around staffing, et cetera, but it's certainly a question that we plan to ask as we go through this process. Has the committee performed studies on light pollution to the local neighborhood from high levels of buildings and parking lot lights?
The long and short is no, not at this time. It's usually done as part of the planning board
It
process.
will be part of the
Will be
plan.
done. That
Definitely
was the
done.
part I want to know. So
It
that'll
is
be done
done.
as part of the planning board
It just
process.
Hasn't been done yet.
Yep.
And Mike, I believe the town has standards for dark
Yes,
sky
they do.
fixtures and other
Absolutely.
things that limit the creep of that light into neighboring areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we had to do that both at the marathon school as well
The
as.
intensity goes down.
Yep.
That's the,
And there's control options that you have within the lights so that at off hours, you can turn them on motion sensors, so they'll only turn on if someone enters the parking lot. There's a whole array of options that the town can consider as they refine that design.
Yep. Will the new facility plan to be used during off-school hours, nights, weekends, summers, et cetera? I think largely TBD. I'm looking over this side of the table, but I'm imagining summer would probably be, because the air-conditioned schools get used first for summer programming. And then from a nights and weekends perspective, I'm supposing that Hopkinton basketball will probably want to get their hands on a new gym where they can for things like that. So, but sort of those standard uses that you see for schools currently.
school.
And an important thing, it's off topic, but not to be lost, part of the design that we're pursuing is the possibility with that, trying to hit that target EUI of arranging the design in such a way so that areas can be turned on while other areas are turned off, which is going to help with the overall energy consumption of the school.
Does any part of the plan for the new facility include overnight or long-term bus parking? Not, there is no plan for that in this plan. With the new facility, are there any wetlands that will be impacted, moved, or encroached on?
Not within the 50-foot no-build zone. So none of the actual wetlands
Yeah.
are touched, filled, or encroached on. There's a no-build 50-foot zone around them that is also not being,
Oh, so we're not even going within 50 feet of
no.
the, okay.
But there's also a 100-foot line around
Yeah.
them too.
Right, okay, so
We're in
none
the
of the
100 foot.
wetlands are being impacted, moved, or encroached on, the answer to that. And that is the list. So again, I want to thank both the residents for putting together this list as quickly as they did. I want to encourage both the residents who submitted these, but also any other residents who might be watching this who have questions about traffic, transportation, or any other aspect of this project. The email address is esbc2@hopkintonma.gov. You can also get that on our project website, elmwoodproject.com. Please send your questions. We will get them out as much publicly as possible. And I also want to thank our partners from Vertex and Perkins Eastman, as well as our traffic engineer who fired this off before he
Typed very
walked out
quickly.
for the day. So we could get as many of those answers as possible. To reiterate, I will type up all these answers, fill in any information that we didn't have tonight, and provide a formal response to the questions. And thank you to the committee for, I think, allowing those questions to come through. I know it was a bit of a long Q&A time, but I think worthwhile. Okay, but then of course I had to hop over to that, so I've lost the agenda.
Our last item was just to remind everyone that we have upcoming community forums on October 24th as well as on November 7th. And that will be followed up with the presentation at town meeting on November 13th and the ballot vote on November 28th. We've been working with the district and with John to develop an extensive summary of all the work that this committee has done that we can share with the community as part of those presentations. And certainly if someone sees the October 10th, 24th presentation on TV and they think of a question, they certainly have the opportunity to come to the one on the 7th and ask that question, or send it in via the Elmwood Project website, so that we can make sure that we address it or evolve the presentation as needed to make sure that any questions that the community has about their new school can be answered in advance of those opportunities to vote at town meeting or to vote in the ballot.
And the presentations that we're working on for those forums are going to be designed to be pretty holistic. I know in the past forums where we've kind of had the episodic journey, we've sort of shortened up parts. I think we want to assume at this point that most of the audience that is engaging at this point has not been engaging throughout the process as evidenced by our numbers. But we really want to make sure we take everyone through the entire journey, but also leave a sufficient amount of time for Q&A within these forums, so that we are able to do that. So the forums, again, will be hybrid. They'll be occurring at the high school auditorium, and we really encourage people to come in person, but the Zoom option will also be available, and we'll have the ability to have questions from the virtual participants as well. So if there is nothing else.
John, I have a comment and a question. Is it
Oh,
okay
sure.
if first of all, I thought that single sheet on the traffic was very helpful, so thanks for all the teams that put that together. But I'm wondering if we can also have one of those put together on what if the vote is no? And the reason is that in some of the conversations I've had, it seems the perception is either I vote for 158 million net, 110 million cost to the town, see my taxes go up X amount, or I vote no, and maybe they put in a couple of modules and we're done. And the reality is the cost isn't going to be zero, but I don't know that we've proactively showed what the cost will be and what the steps will entail. So I think that might be something be helpful with some specifics around how much would it cost and how many modules would we need, and what are some of the other upgrades that we probably would have to do in the foreseeable future, and probably the fact is without any reimbursement from the state. Is that something that's being worked on or could be worked on over the next
I can
week or
take
so?
that one.
Go ahead.
So in discussion with the district, we have actually been working on that very topic. We've gone back to the system-wide study and understood some of the assumptions that we've made about enrollment growth specific to each school. We've looked at some of the impacts that are necessary to take to address enrollment growth at each of the schools based on the assumption that we stayed with a 2 to 3 Elmwood school. And one of the takeaways that is, I'm going to call it, it's an idea that's cooking and not fully baked yet, but one of the takeaways that we're looking at is the fact that the two most affected schools are Elmwood itself and the middle school. Because if you go back to the discussion that we had about the system-wide study, Elmwood's adding of the additional grade took a lot of the pressure directly off the middle school and freed up space, which allowed opportunities for both the high school and the middle school to have more growth for a longer period of time before they needed to be addressed. So we are looking at, in all honesty, Bob's working on it right now, but we are working on opportunities to quantify the number of classrooms that would be necessary in the short term and on longer terms in terms of supplementing with modulars, and what that means in terms of the cost that the town would need to absorb themselves without any MBT or MSBA involvement, so that we can present that information either to a future ESBC meeting or as part of our roadshow that we do on the 24th and the 7th.
John.
Well, I based on how thorough you folks have been, I shouldn't be surprised that you're working on it. So thank you for that. It's something that's really needed. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill. Yes,
Can,
ma'am.
can I just throw in the mix there too, that originally this project was an end-of-life project. And so as I think about what happens if we are unable to, aside from the capacity issues, we will have to invest in Elmwood to make it a healthy place for our students to learn for a while, you know. So there's the end-of-life nature of sort of infrastructure investments, I think, which would be part of the cost.
One thing I wanted to ask Chris is this information that you are working on, you said you would present it at the forums. Is there another way to share this?
I think we can make it into something that could be placed on the website or shared in another manner. It's, what's the right word? It's an analytical look at that needs some assumptions to understand. Yeah. You need a different number of classrooms a year from now than you need 5 years from now, than you need even 7 years from now. And so all of those need to be factored in. One of the things that we're looking at is it's hard to really come up with a design and a cost that's thorough. So we're looking at historic costs that the town has already spent as it relates to modular additions and full additions that have been done on buildings recently. We know that classroom additions that have been done within the last, I'm gonna get the year wrong, 4 years, have included 1.9 for, I believe, a 2 classroom addition at one of the 2 schools. I forget whether it's Hopkins. It's 1.9 and 2.4, but I don't remember which school they belong to. And then we also know that $5.1 million was spent on Marathon to add 4 classrooms there. So we're trying to use that recent data that the town would be familiar with as a yardstick that we can compare to some of the forecasts that will need to add modular classrooms to deal with those increased students, while we're also sharing how the student per class may need to rise, and also sharing whether we need additional facilities for gym classes and whether we need to add additional lunches into the day, so that we're answering those questions not on a, I think the word that was used was scare tactic basis, but it's an analytical analysis of what the implications of that growth mean to how you educate your students in Hopkinton, and what you'll need to deal with the growth that's already occurring ahead of what your two words escaping me, demographers already established in the reconciled estimates that we've been using to forecast the growth within town, because we know from the data that the district has shared that they're already ahead of some of those numbers.
I think so. We'll have to figure out a way that you're right, the complexity of the analysis, the density make it a little bit difficult to sort of put into a one-pager, but maybe we can clip that part of the forum and just make it like a little, this is showing my age and technical capability here, but like make it a little YouTube short kind of thing that people could look, that they don't have to scroll through the entire forum. We can make it a little bit more directive. We'll come up with something that can be more easily shareable, because you're right. I think we need to get this needs to be its own.
Yeah, because what I'm thinking is, for the vote, people are thinking yes and no, yes or no. If they vote yes, there's a lot of information, what happens next, based on the work of this committee and your work on the new school. It's all available online, but there's not much information on the no side. So I agree with Bill. At least at a minimum, it should be just as available as the other information.
Agreed. Okay. Any other questions or comments? That I would seek a motion to adjourn. Nobody?
So moved.
It's really rare that we don't get a motion for that one. Okay, is there a second?
Second?
Okay, we have a motion by Mike, a second by Jagroot. So we are roll call again. Amanda?
Yes, sir.
Jagroot?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
Bill?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so it is unanimous, and we are adjourned at 7:24 p.m. Our next meeting will be the public forum on October 24th. So hope to see as many people there as possible. Again, it is at 7 p.m. in the high school auditorium. We'll also be available by Zoom, but come out in person and join us. And everyone have a good night.
You too.